early on in the investigation into the murders of Liberty German and Abigail Williams. A man from Kokomo, Indiana with a disturbing criminal background had been brought up in connection to the case. The man's name was Jimmy Dale Duvall, a convicted child rapist and registered sex offender from Kokomo, Indiana. Jimmy worked at the Chrysler Kokomo transmission plant around the time the murders occurred.
This is breaking news from Channel 13 Eyewitness
We have
News.
nobody in custody at this time. So as far as I'm concerned, yes, there is somebody out there that did this horrendous crime, and we're going to track him down.
State police talking about the fear and concern in a small-town community after they announced that 2 missing girls were in fact victims of murder.
Investigators solemnly identified the 2 bodies found in Carroll County as 13-year-olds Libby German and Abby Williams. Now, we still don't know what happened to them after they disappeared during an afternoon hiking trip.
Eyewitness News reporter Rich Van Wyk begins our team coverage tonight, first with an update on the investigation. Rich?
Anne-Marie, the autopsies confirmed identities, but how these children were killed, the circumstances surrounding their death, police aren't talking about that. They say they don't want to say anything that could jeopardize this double homicide investigation. For the second day, local, state, and federal investigators scoured over the crime scene. Early afternoon, divers joined the search for clues that could lead detectives to the girl's killer. The autopsies confirmed what everyone, including the teens' families, suspected and feared.
I think they were in pretty much belief that it was their children. But when you hear it from an official, it's still a little still it hits home twice.
One of the hundreds of volunteer searchers found the bodies of Libby German and Abby Williams in a wooded area near Deer Creek. It is an area accessible only by foot or on horse. Well off the popular trails the 13-year-olds were hiking. Dozens of police are now checking hundreds of leads.
We are using resources from all the way from Lowell, Fort Wayne, and the southern part of the state's police, state troopers. We will stay on the job until it is done.
Police say they have no suspects or persons of interest. They're asking anyone who was in the hiking area, who saw something or heard something or took any pictures, contact them.
Should people in this community be concerned about someone running around targeting kids?
My response is no. I feel safe for this community.
Libby and Abby, teens teachers describe as happy and go lucky, attended Delphi's middle school. Crisis teams were ready for students and teachers when they arrived at all the district schools.
They're just asking those questions right now of, oh my gosh, it hit me, and somebody's there for them.
The double homicide has prompted one of the largest investigations some officers say they've ever been part of.
So as far as I'm concerned, yes, there is somebody out there that did this horrendous crime, and we're going to track him down.
Also, police say there is someone out there who probably saw something, was on the trails, was driving that part of the country just east of Delphi. They may have seen someone, they may have seen a car that perhaps looked out of place, and that's why police want that person to call them. Back to you.
Sometime after the bodies of Liberty and Abigail were found on the 14th of February 2017, rumors on Facebook spread that a registered sex offender was being looked at as a person of interest in the Delphi case. The man who was brought up was Jimmy Dale Duvall. It was claimed that investigators went looking for Jimmy and went to his home in Kokomo and his workplace in order to question him. Jimmy Duvall eventually took to Facebook and left comments claiming he had nothing to do with the girls' disappearance and subsequent murders of the 2 girls. Jimmy Duvall responded to people on Facebook claiming he might be involved and said he had given a voluntary DNA swab and that they should call Detective Mike Banish of the Kokomo Police Department if they don't believe him. Speculation around Jimmy Dale Duvall centered around his crime he committed in the late 80s, and it was rumored he had booked himself into a mental hospital shortly after he had been questioned and that he deleted his Facebook. Jimmy Dale Duvall was not working on Monday, the 13th of February 2017, the day the girls were murdered. His alibi was he was at his mother's house when the murders occurred. On Tuesday, January 27, 1987, 23-year-old Jimmy Dale Duvall was arrested and charged with attempted rape, attempted criminal deviant conduct, and a felony charge of criminal confinement. He was placed in the Howard County Jail where he was held on a $75,000 bond. That day he had attempted to lure two girls into his vehicle whilst impersonating as a police officer, and in a third attempt he enticed an 11-year-old girl into his car by holding a knife to her throat and then handcuffing her. He then drove more than 3 hours and then pulled over in a desolate spot to sexually assault her. He also inflicted cuts on her throat, stomach, and wrists. Duvall was also a suspect in a December 22, 1986 Tipton County rape. In the Tipton County incident, a 20-year-old Clinton County woman said she was driving on Division Road, north of Kempton, when she was stopped by another motorist around 11:30 p.m. that night, and that the man's vehicle who pulled her over had a red light on the dashboard. The woman said her assailant had a badge and was wearing a blue baseball cap and blue pants. He reportedly had abducted her and raped her, and she was then treated at Clinton County Memorial Hospital. The Tipton County Sheriff said he did not know if the victim had identified Duvall as her assailant. A year after the January 27, 1987 charges, Jimmy Dale Duvall withdrew from a plea agreement which was meant to have been submitted on Wednesday, the 7th of January 1988. Duvall would have pleaded guilty to attempted deviant conduct, and in return, 2 other counts would have been dismissed. It would have resulted in a non-suspended sentence of 20 to 50 years in prison. Duvall decided to withdraw from his plea because he indicated to the court he thought he would be receiving long-term probation rather than mandatory jail time. Duvall was already on probation for a similar sexual assault crime he committed 4 months prior to the January 27, 1987 incident. Jimmy Dale Duvall originally planned to defend himself on grounds of insanity, but psychiatrists decided he wasn't insane. Duvall's trial was reset by the judge for January 20, 1988 because of his withdrawal from his plea agreement. On January 20, 1988, Duvall's court-appointed lawyer advised him to plead guilty to attempted rape in return for dismissal of the 2 other charges, which was agreed upon with the prosecutor and Duvall's criminal defense lawyer. The agreement was also approved by the victim and her family. A month later, on February 18, 1988, Jimmy Dale Duvall was sentenced to 45 years in prison, with 5 years removed off the maximum sentence for his plea of guilty to 1 count of attempted rape, a Class A felony when committed while armed and with a deadly weapon, in this case, a knife. After serving 18 years from when he was first arrested for the crime, he was subsequently released on the 19th of September 2006. He was given a lifetime registration on the Indiana Sex and Violent Offender Registry. Sometime after the murders occurred in February 2017, an Indiana resident and amateur sleuther named Douglas Rice went to Delphi to speak with locals and a juvenile witness who saw the man in Liberty German's video recording known as Bridge Guy. He showed her images of persons of interest and an image of Jimmy Dale Duvall, a registered sex offender. The young witness claimed he bore some similarity to who she saw. Although she claimed she wasn't sure it was him because the man she saw had his lower face covered just below his nose. Douglas Rice claimed he spoke to the young female witness on several occasions and said she described the man to be wearing a short-billed hat with a hoodie pulled up and a scarf below his nose. He said she described him to be in his 40s and 50s and around her height 5'6" or 5'7". Many people believe Richard Allen looks similar to Jimmy Dale Duvall, and it makes sense that the juvenile witness saw Richard because he bears a resemblance to Jimmy Dale Duvall, the person who Douglas Rice showed her a photo of. Jimmy looks just like the old Bridge Guy sketch, the first sketch originally released to the public. According to a relative of Jimmy Duvall, Jimmy was ruled out via DNA and an alibi.